Hello, welcome to Tennessee Informer. I'm your host, Dave Vance. Our guest tonight is David Baldovin, a retired FBI agent of 31 years. He's going to give his part 2 interview of the show we did last week, FBI's Ordinary Men. But first, if you have an announcement from a conservative organization that you would like to broadcast on this show, please send the information to tninformer@tv.gmail.com the Friday before the show. Now, just so everybody knows, I'm still having some issues with my right eye, so I'm going to have to read off the paper quite a bit. If you want our state to stand up to federal overreach, the best way to do that is support the nullification process bill sponsored by Senator Bowling and Representative Halsey that they intend to bring back this next session. Visit tncss.weebly.com, call to action. Sign a petition and download paper copies of the petition to have other people sign as well. Read the directions on the link. It will tell you where to send these petitions. Our state senators and reps need to know we want this legislation passed when they return in January. Now is the time to get candidates for state office on record as well. D.C. will never fix D.C., only the states can fix D.C. The Gibson County GOP Reagan Day Picnic is Saturday, June 8th from 4 to 7 p.m. The tickets are $50 per day, and May 25th is the last day to buy tickets. Ribs and chicken with all the trimmings are on the menu. The guest speaker is Mr. John DeBerry, Senior Advisor to Governor Lee. The event will be held at 88 Spring Creek Highway in Medina, Tennessee. I was corrected on my misspelling or my mispronunciation of that last week. Nope, it's Medina, home of Alicia Owens. Visit the website at gibsoncountytngop.com to get your tickets. Now a little bit about our guest, David Baldovin. David J. Baldovin served 31 years as a special agent in 3 southern states working on a variety of cases such as bank robberies, bank fraud, public corruption, defrauding the government, civil rights cases, and capturing fugitives. He's been a guest on Worldview Weekend with Brannon House, and his articles have appeared in Front Page Magazine and other top-notch conservative publications as well. One of his most recent articles is The Ordinary Men, which will be part of the discussion. David, thanks for being with us tonight. How are you doing?
Well, Dave, thanks for having me back on as a little addendum to my prior interview, but I appreciate your time and everything you do.
Well, I appreciate you as well, and I appreciate you coming back on. So we didn't get to cover all the ground we wanted to cover next week. In the original interview, you mentioned the comment that was made by one of your supervisors, basically to the effect of, hey, you know, administrations come and go. They may be in 4 years, 8 years, but we're here and we're not going anywhere. And you know, basically that was the bureaucracy talking. The same supervisor also advised you that FBI agents could create fake informants in order to make themselves and SAC look good. Talk about that, and what does SAC stand for?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And again, I'm keying off of my last interview, so if anybody wants context of what I'm going to say tonight, I'd encourage you to go back to my interview of May the 6th on the Tennessee Informer and watch it. Now, the context, again, in which Dave invited me on and I agreed to come on, was the interview that he did with FBI whistleblower Stephen Friend, probably a couple of months back. And the things that the FBI whistleblowers today are talking about, such as Stephen Friend, did not happen overnight, and they did not happen in a vacuum. Dave, you touched on it. Again, to reiterate, the supervisor, when I was probably a couple of years in experience in the Bureau, he basically said that it does not matter who is president, just like you said. Presidents come and go, but we'll still be around. And like I mentioned to you earlier, you know, that doesn't mean a whole lot to a young agent. You're just getting your feet on the ground. But a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about, I've gone back and looked at, you know, and it's a lot more clearer now. Well, it was clear to me before tonight, but what's happening in the country and with the Bureau has, you know, afforded me the opportunity to be able to voice these things that I'm talking about. And the basically the bureaucracy is another word for what people use today as the deep state. In other words, uh, I think Senator Ron Johnson has commented that it's the bureaucrats who run Washington, D.C. We're just here to to make people think that they're represented. But that's a little tangent.
Yeah.
Now, to follow up on what I just said, the excuse me, I got to look at my notes too. Well, yeah, informants. The informant issue, and when I say fake informants, uh, that might mean one of two things. That could be a individual who does not, in fact, exist, or it could be a person that does exist. And what this supervisor would do now, uh, he wouldn't open up a person who does not exist and hand it off to someone else. So in my case, my personal experience and others, but I'm just going to speak for myself. He would open up a so-called informant and then reassign it to a young agent, such as myself. Well, when you're and the comment was it'll make you look good because this is what Friend is talking about caseload wise.
Hmm.
He's talking about actual criminal caseload probably, but I'm talking about the same thing, but as pertains to informant caseload. It's the numbers game.
Yeah.
You had to have so many cases and so many informants, and it'll make you look good, Dave, and it'll make your SAC look good. Your SAC is a special agent in charge of whatever division you're working in. And the SAC, in all fairness, may or may not know what's going on that level. I assume that they probably do with a wink and a nod. Okay,
Right.
they can say that they don't know anything about it if it ever should come to pass. But what does a young guy do when you're handed that situation? Well, what I did basically was, you go out and you meet this person, and the other part of that is you attribute publicly available information to that source. Well, who's going to follow up on something like that within the bureau
Right.
to make sure that that's what's going on? But so I would go out and you would contact the source, and you found out pretty quick that what was going on. Well, you cannot overnight close the source. So you make what I would call a good faith effort. Let's say 90 days, maybe 6 months at the most. You're talking to this guy or lady, whatever it is, once a month, basically, or more than that. And all supervisors really care about in a lot of cases is a piece of paper in the file. Okay, it's really not a whole lot to do with the specific subject matter of what's in the file, but just as long as you got a dated piece of paper in the file, that's what's important. It's the administrative part that's taking over basically the criminal investigation part.
So could you
So
close the source on your own, or did you have to get
yeah,
approval to close the
yes,
source?
you could close it on your own. Yep, you'd go out and you'd figure out pretty quick, and then you want to give it a fair amount of time, saying, okay, I'm going to try, and after a while, you close the source out. Well, guess what? Another one will come along because they like to, you know, keep it going. You're out there working, right? You're pushing this paper, and it makes people think, it makes other supervisors or other agents think that you're really working hard, and it's basically a fraud, what it is. Okay,
So did you guys
it's
have like
it's
yearly evaluations or twice a year? How are your evaluations?
yearly evaluations, right?
Okay, okay. Military has that
Now,
as well, and I saw some of the same along the same lines of what you're talking. We called it fluff. Uh, you know,
Love.
and if you can be creative and you can come up with some numbers that really sound impressive, but anybody that knows the deal will know the deal. We'll figure it
Ex-
out pretty quick.
Exactly. It's funny that you should use the word creative because for a time I was assigned to a DEA task force, and I had one of the agents tell me that I should use more creative language in my write-ups, and, and that's nothing more than what I was already, talking about and what you just mentioned. Now the I fought basically the informant battle. Once I got my feet on the ground in the bureau after a few years, I fought that informant battle basically my whole career. Um, I know I was downgraded at least two, maybe three or four times on my performance ratings for not having informants or not having the requisite number of informants, maybe that I should have. But what you're downgraded for basically is not lying. Okay, that's what it
That's
comes.
scary.
That's what it comes down to. It's they now, and you would confront them with that. After years in the bureau, you could say, hey, you're telling me to lie. Oh no, I'm not telling you to do that. Yes, you are. You're telling
Creative
me to lie.
license. It's creative license, right?
Exactly, exactly. So I mean that I can tell you this. Maybe 2 years. That was one of the things I would have stayed on in the bureau. I mean, I had 30 years when I made this decision, and uh, probably 1 or 2 years before I left, I had this SAC that was putting pressure at just exactly what we're talking about. And it was, of course, stuff rolls downhill, right? So, it was rolling downhill to my supervisor, who was a bean counter. Okay. And, after a while, I said to myself, I've got 30 plus years in. Um, I think I'm probably going to, I could stay another year. I might want to stay another year. I had a decent, pretty good case going at the time. You were talking about big cases in our last interview. You touched on it, but I had a pretty good case going in Memphis at the time. But at any rate, I said, you know what? I think I'm out of here. It's time. And maybe I mentioned this to you either offline or during the interview last week. Um, I was told by one of my former workers several years after I retired. He said, "You got out. You got out at the right time." He said, "You couldn't survive today in today's bureau." And of course, that was in Robert Mueller's FBI. In the early years of Robert Mueller's FBI.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did. And listen, uh, I want people to understand that I appreciated my time in the bureau. Many friends. Okay. I think organizationally, it was meant to do well. There are many great people. I think I mentioned that a lot of the work gets done by good and great FBI agents who, in spite of our leadership, get the job done. So a lot of the things that the public reads about and accomplishments, they don't know what's gone on behind the scenes administratively, within the organization. So I want to give credit where credit's due to many of my former colleagues, but it's just the administrative fraud and lies that a lot of people are asked to do, and some succumb and some don't. So that really sums up the informant aspect of it. But what you can do also is fast forward to not what Stephen Friend talked about, But I don't know if you know who Garrett O'Boyle is. Garrett O'Boyle is another one of the whistleblowers, and he was, along with Stephen Friend, one of the agents that testified in Congress
Hmm.
last year. Okay, and he talked about how he was asked to get wiretaps, Title III wiretaps. Okay, because his SAC needed a wiretap to get promoted and
What's a
to
Title
make
III wiretap?
it's when you make an installation, a bug, okay, and you're instead, let's say, instead of wearing a body wire, instead of an informant wearing a body wire, you actually get approval from the bureau and from DOJ
Right.
to install a bug in an office building or somebody's residence or vehicle or whatever. And that historically required a hell of a lot of work. I mean, and if you did it legitimately, uh, it required a lot of work. Well, what Garrett O'Boyle is talking about now is a case, and in some of these cases, you don't need a wiretap to make the case. Okay, um, you might not need a wiretap. I should say it that way to make the case. Uh, if you only get a Title III type wiretap uh, to when it's absolutely necessary. Well, now apparently from Garrett O'Boyle's testimony is um, what's necessary is an SAC's promotion. Okay, so that comes now that comes down to he didn't need Garrett O'Boyle talks about it was not necessary, it wasn't needed to get a wiretap, but she needed it. She was pushing him to get a wiretap.
So
And if
she,
anybody wants to uh, go back and watch his testimony, it's easily accessible online. Garrett O'Boyle, FBI whistleblower, and how he was threatened and what the FBI has done to him for whistleblowing along this context that I'm talking about. Now, you can take the bloated informant or caseload issue, and now you can fast forward to what's happening today with the wiretap. Uh, it's just more numbers, okay? More numbers for the sake. Instead of an informant making yourself look good or making the SAC look good, now it's risen to another level, okay? And now it's risen to the level of infringing on somebody's rights, even though it may be a criminal case. It might not be necessary to make that case or to have to put a bug in somebody's home or to put a bug in somebody's car or office.
so
So
let me, so the, you're, in this case, an SAC is putting pressure on one of her subordinates to go through the process of getting a Title III wiretap, which I'm assuming the justification of that wiretap, would that not include something about, why you need the wiretap, why you can't get that information in other ways? So he would essentially have to take creative license with why he needs that wiretap? Is that
you're right
accurate?
on line. You're right on line. Yeah, yeah. You have to legally you have to justify why you need this. Well, let's talk about the Trump wiretaps, right? So there you go. The agents, the bureau perpetrated a fraud on the FISA court to obtain those warrants. And what's the difference there in what I'm describing now? I'm describing somebody else's testimony,
Right.
but where I'm getting to that from is that's how incrementally the abuse and the fraud, uh, you know, works its way up through the bureaucracy.
One more question
So
on the wiretaps. So let's just say an agent, bends to the pressure, fabricates, gets it, and then let's say later on it's revealed that, hey, that was a lot of BS that you told us, and you illegally obtained this. Is he the only one liable, or is the SAC liable? Does the SAC have to approve a request for a wiretap, or can the agent just do it on his own and, oh, by the way, be responsible on his own?
You need supervisory approval. It's just not the agent himself.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
whoever names are attached. And in the case of the Trump wiretaps, you've got several signatures on those FISA warrant requests.
Okay.
So and the same thing would be true, with any other, with just let's say a general narcotics case, or any type of case that you're applying for.
Right.
And the necessary supervision, the Bureau headquarters supervisors and lawyers and DOJ, if they're doing their jobs legitimately, would be questioning everything you just asked right there. You know, do you really need this? Why can't we get it in other ways?
Right.
And I mean, I've known people who've done that, and they've gone through the process. I mean, it was a lot of work because you had to go back and say, okay, we haven't tried this. Let's try this angle first. We're not going to approve this until you try this. So that's during my career. I'm aware that, and I never applied for one myself. I came close one time, but I never actually did. But we were able to make the case another way. So
When you were on last time, you mentioned that you were on a SWAT team for the better part of your career. And so now you retired in what, 2000? You went from 1969 to 2000?
you got it.
Okay. So that would have included the Clinton era, however you want to look at it. Anyway, so under Janet Reno, I think that was probably I really have to wonder what the FBI was like under her as the head of the DOJ. Did you see an increase in your time of the usage of SWAT and the aggressiveness of SWAT? Because there were some pretty high-profile things that happened during your time. You had the Waco, you had Ruby Ridge. It seems like there was at least one other. Oh, well, the Oklahoma City bombing. So I'm sure you saw ratcheting up of the use of SWAT and maybe aggressiveness as well.
I I witnessed the increased usage. I personally can't speak to the aggressiveness part of it, part of your question. But yes, the increased usage. Now, you bring back a couple memories when you're talking about the Clinton administration, because I have a picture of myself on the SWAT team. We were performing duty with Janet Reno, guarding Janet Reno when she was in town. So I have my lovely picture taken with Janet Reno. If you ever want to see it, I'll show it to you, Dave.
Probably work real good in the garden.
Now, one of the details I was on was to guard the main witness in the Whitewater case in Arkansas. So I wasn't involved in the investigative part of that, but our SWAT team was uh, hiding out the main witness in a secret location, and then transporting that witness whenever that witness was needed for testimony. We would transport that person back and forth from our location, our safe location, to the attorneys who are doing the questioning. So that was going on during Whitewater, the Clinton administration.
Right.
And I guess I can look back on things like Ruby Ridge, which of course that was HRT. That was the big guys, okay? The hostage rescue team itself that was at Ruby Ridge. And there was many SWAT teams in Waco, and I guess I can look back on that and thank God that I wasn't there during that time. I was on the aforementioned DEA task force, And so that was my number one duty, was to help the FBI and the DEA get along. I wasn't necessarily working drug cases. I was a negotiator, if you want to tell it that.
Between the
Call it
FBI and the
that.
DEA?
Oh yes, oh yes. There's, you know, uh, lots of times these interagency squabbles, they can mushroom, and the SAC actually came down, and people have chuckled about this throughout the rest of my career and tapped me on the shoulder and said, You're going over to DEA," and I looked up at him. I said, "Okay," so. And that was that. But let's get back to the increased usage. Again, it's the incremental use, increased usage over time. And what you see now with the usage of the SWAT teams on these, the Christians at the abortion clinics,
Right.
the grandmas and so forth on the J6ers, the old folks, the J6ers who were in Washington in the Capitol that day, and people like Roger Stone. You're talking about the aggressiveness of it there, which I
Right.
never witnessed that sort of thing. But that's coming down from DOJ. But so many of us, and I say that without any written proof. Okay, I don't have written proof of that.
Right.
But what myself and some of my colleagues do talk about is they say, look, anytime that Christopher Wray wants to say we're not going to do this, he could say that. Okay, he could tell Merrick Garland we're not going to do this, and it wouldn't get done, or he goes along with it, and that's how it gets done. Now he can resign. A man with some courage. If he was being told to do something he didn't agree with and he thought was wrong, he should resign.
But you're saying he has the option. He has the option not to do it. Is what
exactly.
you're. I mean, okay, and not necessarily resign. He can just no, we're not doing that. Correct?
Right. And if you want my resignation, here it is. Okay, it's your option if you want to accept my resignation, but we're not doing this. So in that case, I would assume Merrick Garland would fire him.
Okay.
And get somebody who would. Okay.
Okay.
That's how that would work. And in the same vein, as the stuff rolls downhill, you might have an SAC that gets an order from headquarters saying, you're going to take a SWAT team and go out and arrest these folks. And the SAC has the option of saying, depending on what the case is, no, we're not going to do that. And if you want somebody to you want somebody to do that under my approval, you're going to have to remove me. Now, these SACs are careerists, okay? You got them in the military, right?
Oh yeah.
They're careerists, okay? They want to go up. We've been talking about that. About the SAC needs this or that to make them look good and to get promoted and all that.
Right.
Well, a majority of SACs are not going to fight that, and then it comes down to the SWAT team leader. And what it's getting to is the other part of my article, okay, is obeying orders. It's the same thing that went on in Germany.
Yep.
Okay, with the German
police
battalions, the police battalions there, they had the option of opting out. Most of them did not, which is basically what's happening today with the FBI, which is why I had the idea to write the article, "The FBI's Ordinary Men," because we are nothing more than ordinary men taken out of different sectors of society and gone through training and made into FBI agents.
Now let me clarify something here. So with the police battalions in Nazi Germany, if I remember correctly from the article, they weren't forced to take part in these murders. They had that option. They chose to. They could have chosen not to. They weren't forced. Now, with the FBI, you're not forced, but okay, you're probably going to get fired, right? Is that accurate?
My my evidence of this is Stephen Friend.
Yep.
That's my evidence right there.
Right. Right.
He would not go along with the J6er arrest, and he voiced his concern about what was going on, and this is what you see today. So he opted out. He chose the courageous path. He opted out, and is he's sacrificed a lot,
Yeah.
and
Can,
is
can
still sacrificing a lot.
can you recap a little bit for the audience what happened with Steve Friend? I mean, some people may not be familiar with him or may have forgotten the story.
Stephen Friend, Garrett O'Boyle, uh, and of course there's one other. Uh, well, there's several other whistleblowers, but there's one other, and I can't think of his name right off the top. But anyway, Stephen took objection to being ordered to arrest a certain January 6th defendant that he was being told to go out and arrest on a SWAT team, not just himself, but on a SWAT team. He'd
Right.
already, as I recall, he'd already interviewed this individual. He was cooperative. He would come in and turn himself in if asked to. Okay,
Right.
and they said, nope, we're going to go out and use the SWAT team and arrest him. Now, um, I can't tell you how many times, especially in the white collar crime cases in the last 10 years of my career, my everyday job was on the white collar crime squad. I mean, when you're assigned a SWAT team, that's just an extra duty. That's another hat that you wear. Hostage negotiator, SWAT team. My everyday duty was on the white collar crime criminal squad. I mean, when you make cases on those type of cases, the U.S. attorney calls up the defendants. You've already interviewed the defendant. The U.S. attorney calls up the defendant's attorney and has him turn himself in. Okay. Now, that's not going to happen. You're going to use a SWAT team if you have an armed and dangerous narcotics trafficker, that sort of thing.
Right.
With multiple individuals involved. Those are the legitimate uses of the SWAT team.
You have some
But
criteria, in other words, for when you're going to actually use a SWAT team rather than just, hey, we're going to use it. If you're, in our eyes, a bad guy, we're going to use SWAT team on you no matter what.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Now, that's another thing that over time. Guess what? That item is a checklist on the SAC's performance rating. Okay, how many times have you used a SWAT team? Oh, why not? Why haven't you used them? So, you know, next performance rating, is he going to be able to check that box? Well, if he sends a SWAT team out in every little penny ante case, he's going to be able to check that box, isn't he?
Yeah.
So there you go. It's the same. It's the same problem, just in different parts. With caseload in general, with informants, the incremental use of SWAT teams, and so forth. It's the same. It's the administrative part of the bureaucracy taking over the investigative part, the legitimate investigative part. If you don't need to do something, if you don't need an informant to make a case, then you don't need an informant to make the case. That's it. The bottom line is that.
So how long, and maybe this has been long term and I just didn't realize it. So when you were in, did the FBI fall under the DOJ then as well? Or did they
Sure.
have more independence? So how long has that been the situation?
The FBI has, ever since it was created, it comes under the DOJ. It's just that uh, probably ended during my career, really spanned my career. You had strong uh, leaders in the Bureau that could tell the DOJ to go to hell, okay, to put it frankly. And, we're gonna do what we do, and we're going to take your advice and consider it. But I don't think uh, Clinton or Janet Reno was probably too happy with Louis Free, the last SAC that I worked under, when he had to, go out and collect the famous blue dress, from Monica Lewinsky. So, Louis had some, he was a formidable leader. He came across well. Uh, he didn't get pushed around, and personally, I liked him. I've come to learn a few things about Louis in retirement, just like a lot of bubbles have been burst. Okay, that not quite what I thought, but during my career I wouldn't have known that, and he's still probably the best FBI director on a whole that I ever worked for. So
Now you started off, Hoover was still in office when you started off, correct?
exactly, yep.
So how many different directors did you work under?
Well, let's see. There was Hoover. Um, I'm probably going to miss one or two because of the Nixon deal when all of that stuff was going on in the early '70s. I think Ruckelshaus was an acting attorney general back then. Uh, Gray, what the heck was Gray's first name? Uh, People can Google it. He was in and he got in trouble. And then we had Clarence Kelly. Clarence Kelly, I think, he was a chief of police in Kansas City at the time. He was not there a whole long time, really, as the time period goes, but he was well liked. He was a police administrator. He was old school, so he uh, he was good. But let's see, we had gosh, before Ray, of course, I never worked for Comey or for backtracking now, uh, or for Mueller, but Janet Reno was there in the '90s, and I can't remember if who replaced Reno. It goes back, but I guess during my time, uh, safe to say there were 6 to 7 uh, attorneys general.
Okay. Another thing now, when a SWAT team comes in to it, shouldn't they coordinate with the local sheriff? I mean, is that what you guys normally did? I remember the one you told me that the most high profile arrest you were involved with, it was you, another agent, a local sheriff, and a deputy, and arrested the guy without incident. Um, what's the normal protocol on that? The FBI agents just exclude
We
the
would,
local?
if uh, I guess I'll answer it this way, Dave. There was a time in when I was in the bureau that we had 9 counties in our area. Okay, we had active investigations on 3 sheriffs of the 9. We weren't sure about 3, and we knew that 3 were good sheriffs. So to answer your question is it depends on the local authorities and it depends on what type of case it is that you're going in on. Ideally, you would work with the local and state authorities. You sure would. And they would form, the whole plan would be in place. They would form a perimeter. And then the perimeter would open up, let the FBI SWAT team through, or SWAT teams, however many were involved, and effect the arrest or the raid. Okay, whatever it may be. So yes, if it's a case where you got good law enforcement working good with whatever agencies you're involved with, they sure would be informed, and uh, they would form the perimeter for your team. Now I don't know if I'm preempting where you're going with that, but
I was just curious. I mean, I know that um, there's been a couple cases in Tennessee. I know there was this one in I think Henderson County. I could be wrong about the county, but there was this disabled veteran, and he was staying at his mom's house. And as I understand it, it was just the feds that showed up, just the FBI. They ended up shooting the guy. We never, publicly at least, have gotten the answers on what that was all about. But I know the sheriff was, in talking to people from that district, I know the sheriff was not in the loop about that. And like I say, didn't know about it until after it happened. So I was just curious.
I'm aware of the case. I don't know any details. As I've grown cynical in recent years about my former employer, I doubt that you will ever get a sufficient explanation. Okay. Now, the case that I'm referring to is Paul Vaughn. Okay.
Yep.
That's the case I'm referring to.
Yeah.
And if I'm correct in that case, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. The local authorities did not arrest Paul Vaughn. They did not investigate Paul Vaughn or his protesters, if you want to call them that, at the abortion clinic. And the FBI came in on their own and did it, which again is one of the things that why I wanted to write that article, because in my metaphorical view, Paul Vaughn, the subject of that case, and he's been convicted, is a Christian in the metaphorical trench created by the Department of Justice. It's not a physical trench that the police battalions shot the Jews and others. It wasn't just Jews that were shot. That was probably the majority, I'm sure, but it wasn't just Jews. So you had the physical trenches in Germany,
Right.
and now you have the FBI having the option to either go out and arrest these people in the metaphorical trench or opt out, and most of them are choosing to not opt out.
Yeah. Do as they're told.
Do as they're told. Follow orders.
Yeah.
That's really the bottom line to my article. Is the same things are happening. You're following orders, just like in Germany. And I want to be specific in my article, I state, am I categorically stating that today's FBI SWAT teams are at this time comparable to the German police battalions? And I said no, they are not. I specifically said that. But that slippery slope by following orders is my point in this whole article. That's my point.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, and it was good to see that Steve Friend and others, had a conscience about it and decided they weren't just going to do as they were told. And of course, I know as any federal employee, there are supposed to be some protections for whistleblowers, but I guess that doesn't mean a whole lot in the Biden administration.
Well, it doesn't mean a whole lot. I can attest to the fact it doesn't mean a whole lot within the FBI, because in these when I would contest my downgraded performance ratings, which I've mentioned to you just a while ago, I just didn't let it go by. I contested them, and the deck is stacked against you. Okay, did I think I was going to win? Hell no, I wasn't going to win, because you got whose word are they going to take? This rebel renegade FBI agent out here trying to not follow orders, or are you going to take the
yes man?
Are you going to believe the creative language that the supervisor or the SAC writes up to justify what's being done to this agent? So internally within the FBI, FBI agents are administratively abused, like I'm describing. Okay, and I'm sure probably the same thing. I'd be naive to think it didn't go on in the military and any other government bureaucracy too.
Yeah. Well, back to the earlier statement about the bureaucrats will always be there, and that's true. That's true, but that's why it takes those elected officials that we get in there. They do have to be forceful about things. And this is this is a tangent, as you say. there's a lot of people that say, hey, we need term limits. Well, we already have them. They're called elections. But, if you had the turnover, uh, artificial turnover that some people wanted, that only empowers those bureaucrats because it is so hard. I mean, when you're talking about a government worker, they are hard to get rid of. You can't just, and that's one of the things hopefully Trump will do is overhaul that whole system. But you can't just go fire a government worker. It takes some effort. And those people do, I'm sure in the FBI, military, and everything else, they're all that way. They're right to a degree. They're not going anywhere. I've seen things happen in the military where GS people, GS officials at a certain level, made comments to high-ranking officers, hey, I don't work for you, and I'll be here when you're gone. and I'm sure it's the same way in the FBI. So,
Well, I made in a different context. I made that very statement to an inspector one time, who was, I can't even remember right now, Dave, what the subject matter was, but it was during my later career, and I knew I was in the right. And he came. It was during the office inspection, and he came back and he was trying to take me to task for something. And it might have been informants for all I know now, but he said, "Well, you got to do what the SAC says." And I said, "No, the hell I do." I said, "The SAC does not write my paycheck." I said, "The American taxpayer writes my paycheck." And you don't do that when you got 2 or 3 years in. Okay, I was pretty emboldened, when I made that statement.
yeah,
And so, but they can do to you what they want, as is evidenced by the whistleblowers.
yeah.
So
Any,
I was fortunate. I was fortunate during my career. I had a good career because I worked with a lot of good people, and we had fun. We had a sense of humor, and when the time comes, uh, there was fun time, there was a serious time, and by God, if a certain case required a SWAT team to be used during my career, then we used it. But if it didn't, the defendant was called up and ordered to come in, turn themselves in, or you went out with a few agents, a couple of agents on your own, and put the handcuffs on them and took them in. So.
yeah. Well, I'm sure you saw the situation there in Arkansas a few weeks ago where I can't remember the guy's name, but he was, maybe the VP of the local airport. He was high up in the local airport. Okay, so this is a guy who is, he's got a stable job. You know where he's going to be every day, and it was on some gun charge. And I think that may have been the ATF. I don't remember if it was the ATF or FBI, but bottom line is, instead of going and arresting him at work or on the way to work or something, no, they kicked in his door, ODark 30. He didn't know who it was, so he's defending himself and he gets shot.
That was the ATF, and I read the articles on that. And if, again, I'm reading what's being written about it. Yeah, it was a gun charge, and it sounded like somewhat of a penny ante charge to me, the way it was written up, a nebulous charge. And they send a ATF SWAT team to the guy's house at 6 a.m. Come on. Come on now. Now, again, refreshing people's memory. We talked about Waco earlier.
Yep.
Well, guess who started that? Okay, that was not the FBI that started that. That was the ATF decided that they were going to go in there and effect the arrest. They could have waited, till Koresh was in town,
Yep.
made the arrest, and then, if they had a search warrant, gone in, effected the search warrant, and that would have been it. Yep. But nope, and it somehow, kind of like if you want to fast forward to the Roger Stone deal, somehow, Dave, the press became aware that the that the ATF was going to raid Koresh's compound. Now, I wonder how that happened.
Wow. Yeah, and that's, somebody should. I would think somebody would have to answer for how the press knew about that. But then again, that's obviously those were optics decided on by higher up that must have been approved. Would be my guess. I could be wrong.
Very, very higher up, and I can tell you this regarding this doesn't have. We're off on a little tangent here. Nothing to do with the ongoing problems with the Bureau or the whistleblowers, but I can tell you this, that there was uh, between the SWAT teams and the negotiators, uh, the SWAT teams won out on the Waco incident. Okay, uh,
Oh,
all right. The negotiators did not necessarily behind the scenes. I don't know if you ever get anybody to actually admit to that, but behind the scenes, the negotiators were biting for more time, and the pressure was put on.
is that from Reno,
To,
or do we know?
she was convinced Bureau, by the Bureau higher ups that it was time to go in. There were kids in there, that was part of the deal. There were kids in there, they were being abused and so forth. Um,
So let's
so,
burn them up, huh?
well,
Okay. Yeah. All
yeah.
right. Well, any closing thoughts?
Well, I was just looking at. I don't think really. I think we probably did a pretty good addendum to the prior interview, Dave, and I hope people can take this and put it in a historical context, which is what I'm trying to do. There wasn't back in my career, uh, we didn't have the opportunities really to do because the abuses were not so overt as
Right.
they are today with the FBI. Okay,
Yeah.
there was no reason to go public, which on the internal wranglings, downgraded performances, and all those type of things. You're not going to take that outside the bureau. You fight that within the organization. So,
Yeah.
but today's a different animal, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Animal's pretty good description there. Well, hey,
Yeah.
I appreciate what you do. Thanks for coming on. I'm sure we'll have you on in the future. And hey, you do articles in Front Page. You've had a New English Review. What are some of the other publications you have articles in?
Well, that's basically it. I graduated from the Well, I shouldn't say graduated because the New English Review is a very, very good publication. But I was really introduced to them in 2016, and that's a whole nother subject matter. When I attended a Muslim Brotherhood gathering at Vanderbilt University
Oh yeah, you told me about that. Yeah.
in 2016.
Yeah.
So that's when I was introduced to them, and one of the authors at the New English Review got a hold of what I had done there in confronting another retired FBI agent.
Ah,
So it was
yeah.
FBI versus FBI that night,
Yeah.
and from then it kind of mushroomed into. I guess I developed a little ability to write, and especially if you know what you're writing about
Yeah.
and have some facts to back it up, and uh, people will publish it. So
Yeah.
the subject matters that I'm talking about lately are specifically, uh, uh, this is what Robert Spencer does at Jihad Watch, and what the Front Page Bank folks do. You have excellent folks in both those organizations,
Absolutely.
both of those publications, as well as the New English Review. So,
Yeah.
if anybody wants to read any of my other articles, all you got to do is go to the New English Review and hit by author and look up my name, and there's about a half a dozen different articles there.
Okay. And you're right really well. And hey, I do appreciate all you do and appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely have you back.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, producer. Take care.
Thank you. Take
Good night.
care. Hey, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. Tennessee Informer is available to listen to as an audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, and other popular podcast platforms. Do a search for Tennessee Informer and you'll find all of our shows, or you can find them on our website at tenninformer.com. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter on Facebook, and we are also on Twitter as well at TN Informer. Share us with your friends. Our guest on Monday the 20th at 7 p.m. Central will be Tiffany Boyd, founder of Free Your Children, an organization dedicated to protecting parental, educational, and constitutional rights. She's followed at 8:30 by SEC member Chris Morris from Giles County, here to push back on some of the ignorance and false accusations on the issue of being a bona fide Republican candidate. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there. You know, you do have to have a standard, and he's going to clear up some of those issues. And then on Tuesday, May 21st at 7 p.m., our guest will be author and constitutional expert Joe Wolverton III to discuss state powers and nullification, plus some other work that he's doing with the John Birch Society. Hope you'll join us. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.